Awesome. We are live, and Matt, I'm super excited to join in. And so, just excited to learn a little bit more about you, about TouchPoint, and sort of your history in the
Sure.
space and technology space. And do a brief intro. And
Yeah.
the TouchPoint. So,
All right. No worries. Yeah. So I live in the Denver metro area in Colorado, down in Littleton. I'm actually working from my home church, Waterstone. I got to rep a little bit here, give them a shout out. But I used to work at another church for 3.5 years as a life group director, database administrator, production coordinator. If you've been in ministry, you know what it's like to wear multiple hats. So I was definitely wearing a handful of hats. But after I put in my notice at the church, I was still working there. And Jonathan Carpenter of TouchPoint, where I'm currently working, cold knocked our church selling software. And I always give myself a hard time for this because I don't feel like I gave him the time of day. But he left me his business card anyway. And I was looking for a job, and we connected on LinkedIn. And I eventually was a part of the sales team at TouchPoint for about a year. I'm now switched over to marketing. I'm a marketing coordinator over at TouchPoint, or as I like to put it, a software evangelist. Most of what I do is just communicate what TouchPoint does, what it doesn't do, try to highlight some of our things, but also, more importantly, establish the right fit for churches when it comes to church management software. It's funny in hindsight, when Jonathan came to our church, TouchPoint was probably not the right solution for that church, just based off of size and a couple other structural things. But God used that to bring me aboard to TouchPoint. Now I get to use my gifts in this way. So that's kind of the 3,000-foot view, so to speak.
that's super cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like your transition from working in ministry to working in a different facet of ministry. Of course, like a lot of the people that watch this kind of material, they're either IT professionals or aspiring IT professionals at churches or other types of organizations. What was that transition like? And what were some of the things that you were
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I've had a couple of different careers, job aspect. Most of them revolve around management, people management. Worked as a store manager at Starbucks for a while, worked as a project manager at a communications company, and then worked at the church, and life groups were my jam. But I was handy enough with tech to do the database administrator and become the de facto IT guy, right? Fixing printers and Wi-Fi and things like that. That, you know, since Jonathan had met me, gave me his card, I had database knowledge. I knew how churches used it. So I was able to speak to that. But then, I've had a plethora of other people management kind of knowledge. So it was definitely a transition, right? Stepping out of ministry in that way, and then working remote, right? Like this is the first time I've worked fully remote, and so that's another reason why I come and I work for my home church, so I can run into people and have conversations and water cooler talk. Um, but I do believe in God's sovereignty, like just within my career path, like I've seen these seasons of life, and he's equipped me through each season. And right now he's got me at this season with TouchPoint. I'm loving it. There's a lot to do. Not a lot of people have heard about TouchPoint. It's not uncommon, even though we've been around since, you know, um, 2009, 2008, 2009 out of Bellevue Baptist. But it's just kind of getting the word out and seeing if people would take a look at us. I have a lot of creative license now to write some blogs, to go grab a coffee with Zach when I randomly meet him on LinkedIn. So I'm finding other ways to connect with people beyond the tech, and so that's been kind of fun too. So I don't know. I never would have guessed it would have resulted this way, right? I couldn't have predicted a career pathline like this, but God's just been, you know, provided. He just provides, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, that's super cool. It's interesting to see like the routes that you get taken through in life when you
Yeah.
have to decide what that looks like. So that's really interesting. I'm curious too. I mean, obviously we've talked a little bit about this. But if you were to describe TouchPoint in short, really kind of like the particular need. Yeah. Walk me through a little bit of that.
Yeah, no. So like TouchPoint, and church management software in general can be kind of a niche market, right?
Yeah.
Almost every church has a CHMS, so it's not that it's not a product that churches don't know about. But the thing about TouchPoint is we typically serve large churches who have unique needs, and that's kind of where our sweet spot is, right? So if there was like a church demographic, if you're averaging 600 in weekend attendance, including women and children, right? So we're not going into Jesus feeds the 5,000 numbers. We're going with every single person is counted, 600 plus. That's kind of like the starting point where churches start to feel the pain of maybe limited tools, limited functionality. And what can tend to happen is almost this spot on the wall complex where they're like, okay, that's an issue. That spot's there on this wall, but we just kind of get used to it. Or we slap another coat of paint. Maybe I should say a crack in the wall for home remodelers there, right? Like you just throw some caulk in there, you repaint over it. And a year later, you're probably going to have to do the same thing. So sometimes it makes sense for churches to just get an integration. To add to their package, to upgrade, to do some of those things with their current system. But eventually, if you really evaluate, it's just not sustainable. There might be data silos, other time inefficiencies, things like that. So where TouchPoint stands in is we're like an all-in-one solution for database, giving, and app. All of that talks to each other, right? And so it's all housed under one umbrella. Being kind of that all-in-one, we don't do like a lot of integrations. There's some that we still have to do, like background checks, right? We have a couple of background check integrators, as well as like text messaging. It's just for churches that's important to be able to text their congregation. That's just a different software and integration for that. But as far as when Bellevue Baptist created it, is supposed to have like discipleship in mind. So it can be kind of boring to talk about the fact that like, hey, TouchPoint works out of the box, but is completely customizable, which means like you got custom reports, you can run a SQL script or a Python script or different things like that can be super high end, but all of it is with it discipleship in mind, right? That every number is a person, every person has a story, and those stories matter. And the larger a church gets, the harder it can be to kind of close that back door, right? Can I share like a quick shout out to Jonathan Carpenter about some of his ministry experience? Is that okay?
Great. Yeah. Yeah.
So he's been a pastor for over a decade, right? Used to work in lots of different churches, big, small church plants, stuff like that. But at one particular church, they baptized like, I think it was 1,500 people in a 3-year span, which is awesome, right? Like that's incredible. 1,500 baptisms is awesome. 500 baptisms a year. But in that same 3-year span, their attendance only grew about 300. And so like you do the quick math there and you see that there's a problem. And that doesn't always land on like your church management software and your reporting and everything else, but that can be a part of it, right? Like, so do you have the tools to be able to reach out when somebody's going through a hard time and they start disengaging from the church? And then before they realize it, they're like, oh, I haven't been in a month and nobody's called me. Nobody shot me a text, right? So the larger a church gets, the harder that gets. Yeah. And that's just like one facet of kind of what TouchPoint does to elevate discipleship and keep people connected, kind of keeping the big church feeling small is how we get described. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super neat. Yeah. I think we talked about this actually in last week. It's a very interesting situation. You actually heard, cared for, and that gets really challenging when things get big. So,
yeah.
That's one of the most, like one of the best uses of software. So,
yeah. I don't know if you've ever read Pete Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Discipleship.
No.
But when he kind of talks about how, people want things optimized, right? They want a process. They want an assured result. And it just always stuck out to me when he said that discipleship isn't optimized. It's customized. it's personalized, right? It's to the individual. And, pastors and church staff members, and you can't just keep hiring people for every 100 that walk in through the door. You need things to help, make things more efficient, to reach out to people and to connect and to not let people fall through the cracks. And inevitably it happens where we're people, there's nothing perfect out there. But if there's a way to have kind of a personalized, customized approach to discipleship, even within a large church, like, man, technology has made strides
Yep.
further than ever before. So we have the capabilities to do it. We just try to connect people to those tools, right?
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the other questions I've got too. Obviously, technology is challenging to implement. It's
Yep.
challenging to change. There are lots of hesitations I've seen in the churches and the nonprofit space, of course, and
Sure.
in for-profit. Everybody's hesitant to change when it comes to technology,
Yeah.
admittedly. How do you guys approach sort of, I guess, the migration? Once maybe a church is using a different solution from
Sure.
100 to 500, and they're starting to feel that pain, they hit 600, and now they're saying, all right, we need something a little bit more sophisticated. What can we do? How do you
Yeah.
navigate that change?
Yeah, where I feel like I've seen the most success, and this is probably more like advice that if you're working at a church and a church staff, is the team mentality, right? I worked at a medium-sized church, so at the end of the day, if I said I wanted to switch softwares, my boss would have said, okay, do it. And then I was responsible for all of it, including the training and integration, implementation. But when you get to a church of that size, having a team with key leaders in particular ministry areas, they're all going to buy into that software, whether it's TouchPoint or anyone else, right? Making sure that everyone's on board. We have an executive pastor that honestly kind of talked to his staff who said, we're not doing data silos anymore. Like, that flew before, but we're investing in this product. It can do so many things. You need to use it. So stop using all your other little side programs and things like that. That's making a mess, and kind of putting your foot down, so to speak, as a staff.
Yeah.
Organizations and businesses tend to do that well. Churches struggle with that, right? We live in a land of grace, and it's a beautiful place. And yet we can learn something from the business world. So the first thing I would recommend is just having a team. TouchPoint specifically, like, we have a whole onboarding and training team, from kickoff call to, hey, how do you clean up your data, right? Like, how do you get all of your existing data to move into TouchPoint? That way you don't lose it, because that data is valuable. It tells a story. So you don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose records, anything. And it can be a process depending on how motivated a church is. It can be a quick process, and sometimes it can take longer. Staying committed to it as well. I think if you're beginning to have, second thoughts or things like that, like, being really clear about what your objectives are, and is the short-term pain going to be worth the long-term fruit, right? Because, okay, you're feeling this pain now, and maybe it doesn't seem so bad, but depending on the trajectory of your church, it's not just going to magically get better. So unless your church shrinks back down, more than likely it's not going to get better. And maybe you start throwing some Band-Aids on it. You get an integration or two. You hire another staff member. You want your technology to work harder for you. You want it to save you some time so you can focus more on the people and less on, it takes me, this much time to reconcile my finances. So sometimes just having that vision in mind is a big thing. We recently signed a church partner in Tennessee, and they reached out to us for some swag and like a welcome video, because they're basically going back to that team. They've been using the same system for like a decade plus.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of a big deal, and I'm sure that there's fear, right, about making a change. Yeah, I'm an Android user. If you tried to hand me an iPhone for free, I would be very scared about that, right? I'd be very tentative.
Yeah.
So even I don't like change. But at the same time, they ask for these things because they're having a big old party. They're having their own kickoff. They're making it fun. Like
Yeah.
database doesn't sound fun. You can make it fun. We've heard of church partners do scavenger hunts to help train their staff members how to use the system. Like,
Yeah.
hey, log into TouchPoint and find so and so's birthday. What's so and so's t shirt size? When's their anniversary? Add
Yeah.
somebody to a group, and we've seen some incredible churches do some really fun things. So, like, there's only so much we can do, right? So then it does kind of go on to the church of like, what is that vision and that attitude that you're approaching a change with? And I'm not saying that you're going to get 100% buy-in from a large staff. It's just not feasible. But if everybody's on the same page, I really do think, whether it's with TouchPoint or somebody else, your staff will be united. They'll get it, right? They'll see the value behind the tools that you decide to invest in.
Yeah, man, I kind of want to take that idea. I don't know. I like that. Doing a party or something like that. Because I mean, obviously some of the stuff that we work with, like internet or cybersecurity, most of the staff members are never like a phone system that sometimes will change stuff like that. And it's a huge benefit to the ministry. It might save thousands of dollars a month. I just looked at a client that's going to save $1,200 a month for 50 licenses, which is a lot of money. That's a lot of money to save. And so obviously it makes sense. And the system's even better than what they had before. But again, that scary change of like transitioning over to something new, people are nervous. They don't know what's going to go on. And I think it would be really cool to explore like a party idea of like, hey, here's some fun stuff. We're all going to go through this together. We're going to make this exciting. Nobody thinks phones are exciting except for me. Like, I think I might be the only person on the planet who finds phones exciting.
But here's the thing, like, you're speaking numbers to me, and I'm a big Excel guy. And so it's just like extrapolating on what you could do with those dollars, right? And how you can, especially for a church or a nonprofit, how you can invest those differently. And maybe it is hiring more support staff, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it is reaching out to the community and being able to do more projects. And I mean, like, I'll be honest, like a lot of people hear about TouchPoint, and TouchPoint's not the cheapest. But then when you start looking at like giving and transaction and ACH fees and those things that add up for other providers that are more cost effective, or hey, we don't have to spend money on MailChimp or a Constant Contact because that's included. Like, they seem like little things, but if you really put it on the budget sheet, are you gaining back time or dollars or whatever resources to be able to put that back into your ministry, your nonprofit? So like, you say that about phones, like that's no small chunk of change, man. So like, if you think I'm saying, if you're spending too much on your phone system, please call Zach. Okay. Just have a conversation with him. He's going to be super honest with you. It's a good dude.
But yeah, and I mean, like really anything technology wise, like you should never be spending more than you have to. And there are some things where it's worth spending the extra money.
Right. Yeah.
And I full-heartedly believe that, particularly in like cybersecurity and backups, do not check out on stuff like that. Or your church management system when it comes to churches, don't cheap out. Get the thing that's going to do what you need it to do, because otherwise the amount of time that you're going to spend fixing the mess is going to be the issue.
Yeah.
And so like what we see that with cybersecurity, where like if you have an breach, for example, something like that's going to be so silly. You're going to wish you spent the extra money on it. And for a church management system, if you're buying something that's outside of your ability, or you're buying something that doesn't do what you need it to, like let's say you're a really large church with thousands of members, there are some systems that will not fit what you're trying to do. But if you're a church that has a few members, you may not be a fit for something that's particularly custom, where you have to have staff to manage it because you just don't have the budget. So pick the right thing. I mean, that's really the moral of the story, is just pick the right thing for the job.
From a kingdom perspective, like it's important that um, you know, you if you're selling a product that doesn't serve the church, um, it's not doing anyone any favors,
Yeah.
right? So when it comes down to it, like it's just so important that if you're not the right fit, or if a company's not the right fit, that there's that honesty there, because we don't want a church signing up for TouchPoint and then a year or so have buyer's remorse or anything else. It doesn't do well for our brand, but think about the impact that it does for the staff and for the kingdom
Yeah.
and for all the members there. But yeah, just we're gonna go on an adventure.
Sweet. This is
I'm
exciting.
very
I had one of these.
So we're gonna tour the church here, okay? And I'm gonna go find some place that I'm less echoey. Sorry.
No, no
Yeah,
problem. Yeah, this is
uh,
exciting. It's an added adventure to the.
I know, right?
To-
Have you ever experienced this before?
no, not yet. No, this is fun.
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Hopefully the Wi-Fi
This
doesn't
is,
stop, but if it
I
does, then
know.
it'll help.
If it does, I know the guy. It
Yeah.
might be able to. It might be able to help with that here. So this is Waterstone. I'm leaving the hub. It's just outside our sanctuary. It's beautiful, but it's very echoey. You still with me?
Yep. Still here.
All right. Oh, I found an empty room.
Awesome.
All right. Okay. Go ahead. So anyway, I was just talking about right fit, and like I wouldn't want to be sold something that is not going to fit my needs. And at the end of the day, like same thing. Um, Father's Day's coming up, right? So when it comes down to it, if your dad needs a tool, are you just going to go buy him like one screwdriver if that's what he needs, or if that's what he asked for, like a level, like his level broke or something? Okay, basic tools, that's totally fine. Or does he need like the full-on drill with extra batteries and drivers and everything else that goes along with that? Like, find the right tool with the right job. You can hammer a nail in with a drill, but you probably ought to use a hammer, right? Like, so what is the fit here? And are you identifying what the actual need is and investing when it makes sense to invest, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Speaking of kind of investments and like the future and like planning for things like that and going forward and having the right fit, how do you see church management systems as a whole, maybe just the industry as a whole changing,
Oh yeah.
or even specifics to TouchPoint? Like, what do you see as kind of like the next step of these types of solutions?
I think there's been like a mad dash, and I was talking to a friend about this a couple of years ago for that all-in-one solution. So you're seeing payment processors and CHMSs basically coming together, and
Yeah.
that's part of TouchPoint's story as well. We were just a standalone CHMS for years, and Give was a standalone giving platform, GYVE,
Yeah.
and all came underneath Cass Commercial Bank's umbrella. Cool plug for Cass. They have a faith-based division for church financing, so
Yeah.
that's why they like identified they weren't just a bank conglomerate trying to acquire companies. It's with a faith-based purpose. But like you've seen a lot of that, CCB and PushPay, Ministry Brands has had, a lot of brands, both giving and CHMS, and I think they're kind of consolidating all that into Amplify, Breeze and Tithely, so it's kind of going that route, and I think it takes time for the giving and the CHMS and the change when two systems kind of come together. That third piece is kind of like an app. Some people
Yeah.
have an app, some don't. And is that app an extension of your website, or is it elevating ministry? Right. And so I think that's where, like, when apps came out on our phones, and it was like, there's an app for that. There's an app for that. Hey, we
Yeah.
have a church app that's basically the same as our website. Is there some other thing? Because I think people are kind of like apped out, right? I don't want to go download another app just so I get a notification. Like, there's got to be some extra value to that. So I think the industry is kind of progressing in those ways. And then the other buzzword is AI, right? Whether it's chat features, help desks, things that go with that. It'll be, I'm aboard the AI train, maybe not as much as some. Personally, I just think it saves me a lot of time to be able to do stuff like this. But it'll be interesting to see how the church management sphere adopts AI to move forward. And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I am interested to see what that does. I know there's definitely several use cases for it. And I think really, I think the biggest thing to use AI for is potentially to just augment the care process for people. And like maybe you see, for example, through the use of some other tools plus your CHMS, that there's a drop in attendance for one reason or another. Maybe you're able to tie that into other systems within the church to monitor kind of the, I guess the how things are received, for example. There's so many different ways that this might go, but then also at the end of the day, it's like, how much can you really AI something? And to your point of like, people are apped out. People are so AI'd out at this point. It's been ridiculous. I mean, you put AI, slap that title on anything, and then all of a sudden, it's a fancy product and whatnot. And the intentional use of AI is certainly going to be interesting to see. But yeah, that's cool. That's interesting, and to hear that perspective. So, and so I see we're kind of coming up towards the end of the time here, but wanted to just kind of close out with maybe like one final thought or a couple final thoughts here, as well as just how people can find you or find TouchPoint and whoever you want them to find at TouchPoint.
Yeah, no. I mean, hey, check out our website, right? If you're intrigued enough, go to touchpointsoftware.com and take a look at our features, things like that. If you want to talk to me, I'm active on LinkedIn. So if you're obviously on LinkedIn Live and doing this, you can hit me up and send me a request. I'd love to just have a conversation, even if it's like, hey, we're a church under 600. Who would you recommend? I'd love to just talk to you and point you in a couple of good directions. So always wanting to be of service. My email is matthew.brown@touchpointsoftware.com. And at any point, if you want to request a demo, it's on our website, touchpointsoftware.com/demo. At the end of the day, I'm a big believer in healthy evaluation, right? And so sometimes just taking a look. And so if it's been a while since you've took a look at what else is out there, we were talking as a team, I think it was the iPhone 6 came out 10 years ago. So again, I'm not an iPhone person, but do you still have your iPhone 6? Do you still have the same phone that you had 10 years ago? Probably not. Right. Yeah. So since then, there have been lots of improvements to smartphones, and everyone's upgraded. And so that doesn't mean that that's the case for your church, but if you've been on something for a while, if you haven't seen what else is out there, and just making sure that you have the best thing for your ministry, pull up 2 or 3 different CHMSs, set up demos, tell them you're just looking, so there's no expectation there, and see, are you with the right fit or not? My church last year did a demo of TouchPoint. They liked what they saw. They stayed with the incumbent just because they weren't in enough pain to make the move. And I still attend here, right? So I didn't hold it against them. But no, I just want to encourage healthy evaluation, especially as you're rolling into the summer. And maybe some things have slowed down. Check a couple out and see what you think.
Yeah, this is definitely a good time to look at it. I totally echo that. I mean, really anything from a technology standpoint, while things slow down, get a little bit easier, that's great. So yeah. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you jumping on, man. It was fun going on the walking adventure through the church. And
can I just do a quick prayer? Is that okay?
Before
we close it down?
Okay,
yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Father God, we just thank you so much for today and the time that we got to spend together. We thank you for just your sovereignty, just the connection that I got to make with Zach and having coffee with him about a month ago and now doing this. God, I thank you for his work. I just ask for a blessing on his family and his bride that you would provide for him, and you would bring people into his network that he can serve and support their ministries, their nonprofits. God, we just, above all else, we want you to be glorified. So whether it's through our businesses or organizations or through a competitor, God, we want to lead people into maturity to make the best informed decision for their situation. And we want to rejoice in that. Love rejoices in the truth. And so we want to just guide people in love and in truth to make good decisions for their churches, for their nonprofits. God, we give you all the glory. We thank you for this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. That was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we'll have to go grab a coffee real soon, okay?
Sounds great, man. Looking forward to
Thanks.
it. Appreciate you jumping on.